I'm joint CEO of Welcome Churches. So a warm welcome from me and from the whole Welcome Churches team. Some of us are visible and you'll be hearing from us, and others are working behind the scenes this evening. I want to give a warm welcome to our special guest speakers, Sir Simon Hughes, Dr. Kandaya, and Patrick Regan, OBE, who is our Welcome Churches patron. And we're so glad to be sharing this evening with you, and we're looking forward to hearing from each of you. We have a very fast moving and a very varied programme this evening, and our desire is that each of you take away new thoughts, new inspiration, new courage, and a renewed sense of God's heart. We will be keeping you all on mute, but we would love you to interact on the chat, and many of you have been saying hello, and some of you have been telling us where you're from, so that's been great. It's nice, really nice to see you all. So as we move into the evening, please comment in the chat, perhaps when you find something particularly encouraging or interesting, and please do write your questions in the chat. So our speakers will be available on a panel around 9 o'clock, that will take place, and they will be responding to your questions. So we will be compiling the questions from the chat, and we'll spend time answering them later on in the evening. We're also recording this event, and we will be sharing it on our social media in the coming weeks. So if you don't want the small possibility of your face being shown, then please feel free to turn off your camera. So let's get started. Emily Holden, who co-founded Welcome Churches and is now joint CEO with me, will kick off the evening. So over to Emily.
Thanks, Sue. Yeah, so just to start with, I wanted to give you a bit of an overview really of our journey so far as Welcome Churches. It's been quite a whirlwind and it's been quite a roller coaster at times, but it's been a really exciting journey that God has taken us on, which has been a real privilege to be a part of. So really, the journey began in 2015 when churches started to ask what they could do to respond to the plight of refugees during the Syrian refugee crisis. Before then, a local charity in Derby was running the Welcome Boxes project, helping to say welcome to newly arrived refugees and asylum seekers through the visual hello of a welcome box. But following the refugee crisis, Welcome Boxes became a national project, and churches could then train to run Welcome Boxes in their community. And as this national project grew, we realised that we needed a charity that had a national scope rather than a local one. We also wanted to help churches to understand how life-transforming and completely church-transforming welcoming refugees and asylum seekers is. Welcome Boxes, which is one of our projects, is so much more than a box. As you welcome refugees and asylum seekers as a church, it has the potential to completely transform the makeup of your church. God takes you on a journey of welcome so that refugees and asylum seekers are included in every part of your church's life and are able to contribute to the life of the church too. And so that's why we named the charity Welcome Churches, as we knew that the vision was so much bigger than a box. So in 2018, we became our own independent charity. And in 2019, we launched our Welcome Network, which was set up to profile churches running Welcome Boxes and other churches across the UK who are refugee welcoming, particularly churches who are showing an intentional, proactive welcome to refugees and asylum seekers. Then in 2020, COVID hit, but during COVID, our reach as a charity has really expanded. We have been able to connect with a lot more churches from across the UK, from our own homes, in a way that we would never have been able to do before. We also saw new needs amongst the refugee and asylum seeker community. More people were getting in touch with us, asking to be connected with a local church in new areas that we didn't have a church already there, particularly as hotels were being used to house asylum seekers during the pandemic in new locations which weren't used to having refugees and asylum seekers before. So that led us to start accepting churches in our network who had little experience of welcoming refugees beforehand. And we realised that we wanted to do all we could to connect refugees and asylum seekers with a local church community, no matter what their experience had been before. Because no matter where a church is, we knew that God had called them to welcome the stranger. And the best way to learn how to do that was to welcome the person who had just arrived. We're all on a journey, and none of us belong to the perfect church which has got the issue of welcome sorted. So now we go on that journey with every church in our welcome network, encouraging each one to grow and develop in how God is challenging them to be more welcoming to the stranger in their midst. And at the end of 2020, we also started to hear of a new need that was coming to the UK to welcome people coming from Hong Kong through a new migration route for people with British national overseas visas. So whilst these people aren't refugees and the route is an economic migration route, it is also the biggest migration to the UK since Windrush, and over 300,000 people are expected to come to the UK through this route. So we were asked if we would help the UK church to get ready to welcome these people. And so we helped to set up ukhk.org to profile churches who are Hong Kong ready as well. Since this initiative launched in January, we have seen over 500 churches respond to be Hong Kong ready, and over 80% of those have said that they want to welcome refugees too. So there has been exponential growth this year as we have helped local churches to welcome those arriving on their doorstep, and we are excited to see the journey that God takes each one of them on. Together, we really can see our vision of every refugee being welcomed by the local church become a reality. Because if each church in the UK welcomed just 4 refugees or 1 family, then this vision would easily become a reality. So tonight we hope to inspire you of the difference that welcoming refugees can make to your church and your community. And I'm now going to hand over to Ali and Sue, who are going to speak more about refugee integration in our communities. Over to Ali and Sue.
Great. I'd like to introduce Ali to you. He is our integration officer. He's in his 2nd year with Welcome Churches, so very much part of the team and growing with us. He's choosing not to use his video for this event, just to protect his personal security. But he is there live behind his screen, and we have a few minutes to speak to him about integration and some of the needs of refugees and asylum seekers. So Ali, you have a lot of experience, including personal experience. What would you say are the biggest challenges for refugees in terms of integration into a new life in the UK?
Hi, everyone, and thanks, Sue. Yeah, well, there are things that I would call them immediate needs and obvious needs that often people think of, such as learning the language, which is going to be English, or sorting out housing options, or getting children into the education in schools, find a long-term job. These are important elements, and they can take actually a long time, and all of them are the elements and the steps that help integrations. But when we speak about integration, it is very complex. Integration is a long-term journey over many years, and with many other challenges apart from the immediate needs. Becoming part of a new community where people know you and accept you takes a long time. It's not a quick process it's not a quick process to be part of the community, honestly, and feel that you're part of the normal life. It is really a two-way process between refugee and the local community. Many refugees feel very alone, and they don't have their family and their friends around them. I believe that an important factor in making someone feel at home is the friendliness of people they encounter on a daily basis. Being recognized and greeted by others in a neighborhood is greatly valued. Small acts of friendship have such a positive impact on a person. Friendliness from the community is very important in helping refugees to feel more secure and persuading them that their presence is wanted, not resented. I hope that it could give you some kind of a clue about the challenges.
Thank you, Ali, and for sharing some of your heart in that. I like what you said, reminding us that integration is a long journey. And I do really like this encouragement to us in small acts of friendship. I think that has a huge amount behind it. And we are all still under restrictions because of COVID, but can you just let us know what you think the particular needs of refugees have been? What's been highlighted during the pandemic of the last year or so?
Yeah, I mean, we have become more aware of digital exclusion. Many refugees have been much more isolated because they didn't have access to online support or online church during the pandemic.
Mm.
And remember that most refugees do not have their families around them. This has been a huge challenge for refugee and asylum seekers and have made them much more isolated and alone. We need to respond to this as a church and be there for them and offer friendship to them. We might not be able, honestly, to fill all the gaps, but we can show them that we are there for them and we care for them, and we are keen to help them in any ways and in any capacity we can. It's important that we reach out to the refugees at this time as we slowly come out of pandemic, hopefully, to make sure that we are including them again in our activities. Showing these small acts of friendship by inviting them to meet us or meet the church community. As I said before, it is really a two-way process.
Yeah.
Personally, Joseph's story in Bible is something that really I like it. I mean, while he was a refugee in Egypt, and that helps me a lot when I have faced difficulties, or the time that when I have felt being alone or excluded.
Mm.
Comparing myself to parts of Joseph's story has given me a lot of encouragement. Even though I haven't been through the situation that Joseph did.
Yeah, I've often heard you speak about Joseph's life and what an encouragement it's been for you and a strength for you. And we've talked about it a few times before. What elements of the story of Joseph particularly helped you and perhaps might also help us today as we also face challenges too?
I could summarize it really in 3 words that really resonated with me: patient, faithful, and hopeful. Joseph's patience is a great reason for me. While he was under lots of pressure, was accused of a crime that he didn't commit, with his dignity under question, he was brought down from the palace to jail. And the second is really important, is faithful. He was faithful. He knew that God was with him, and God was the witness that he was righteous. And he didn't do anything wrong, although he was tempted by his master's wife. And that somehow connects us to the third one, which is hope. And that being hopeful, that brought him hope to bear with all these difficulties and wait for the right time for his prayer to be accepted. And once it was accepted and it was done, he came out of the dark and he was shining again. I believe we all hold onto these things in any difficult situation. If we stick to what Joseph did and put our hope in God, being confident and faithful to him.
Ali, thank you so much. Thank you for sharing just a tiny bit of the wisdom and the experience that you have with us tonight. And I do really like those last words: patient, faithful, and hopeful. And that's just really good. And I want to dwell on those a bit this week. If any of you have questions for Ali, please do write them in the chat. And Ali will be on the panel later on, so you can perhaps get to hear from him again. It is a challenge for us as a church to respond to the needs for refugees and asylum seekers to be welcomed into our communities and intentionally included, as Ali said, with small acts of friendship and during that long journey of integration. So next up, Joanna, who is our communications officer, is going to show you an inspiring short video about a church that she actually went to visit and how they have responded practically and how they have been extending welcome and community to refugees and asylum seekers in their area.
Hi, my name is Dave Kruczek. I'm the leader at Grace Church Bolton. We've been involved in Welcome Churches for a couple of months now, not a long time at all, and specifically with the Welcome Boxes projects. And we initially undertook getting involved because we wanted to reach out to those in our community that are lonely, those that are secluded, those that are on the edge of things and maybe have just come into Bolton and don't have any contacts, they don't have any family, they don't have any friends. And we thought this was a great way for us to reach out into the community, a great way for us as a church to take God's heart for these people and go and meet them where they're at. And this provided a good platform for that with a great link in with Welcome Churches and with the experience they've got and the expertise that they could bring and the insight that they could share with us and the things that we could learn from them and things that they have already in place that we could implement into our location where we are here in Bolton.
My name is Tazo. I'm one of the leaders here at Grace Church. So we, as a church, decided to join Welcome Boxes. I think mainly because our leadership is committed to hospitality, which is one of the tenets of the Christian faith. So when we get a referral, of course we quickly have to make contact with the person who has been referred to us, just to let them know that we are here and that very soon we'll be getting in touch with you.
I think one of the beautiful things about being involved with Welcome Churches is that we get to display the glory of God even more as we come together as God's church, because God's church isn't all white, or God's church isn't all black, or God's church isn't all one colour or all one nation, but His church is multicultural, it's multiracial, it's multilingual, it's multi-everything, and we love to see that reflected in our gathered community here at Grace Church. Even though over the last year we've not been able to gather as we might have wished to, we can still represent God's glory in all that we're doing, and it's been great to have the guys that we've made contact with recently come and start being part of us as Grace Church in person and online, and it's just brilliant to have different languages involved. It's great to get to know people's different backgrounds and their experiences and what they bring and what God has put in them, and trying to bring that out of them as we meet and encourage one another.
So yeah, as you saw in the video, that was all about Welcome Boxes, one of the projects that we run. So yeah, so I was very glad to visit Grace Church, and they've been running the project for the last few months. And since the new asylum seekers that they welcomed in the last few months, they've also decided to invite their friends to church and come along. So they were just telling us how their church has grown in terms of newcomers, refugees and asylum seekers. So it's really nice that when you take part of this project, a lot more people can come, to your church, and it's just a really, nice community building, as you can see what Dave was saying about, the church being, the same tribe and nation and everything. So yeah, it was really encouraging to visit them and just to see the work that they're doing. Yeah, thank you for watching. Up next we have Emily.
Great, thanks, Joanna. I watched that video for the first time earlier today, and I was just so inspired by Dave and Tuzzle and the team at Grace Church. I was thinking, I need to go to Grace Church Bolton. That's a church I want to be a part of, because a church that embraces the full kingdom of God, where every tribe and tongue is welcome and included, is a really good place to be. So we're really inspired by what you're doing in Bolton, and yeah, really grateful to have you part of the network as well. So I'm joined now by Sir Simon Hughes. Some of you may have heard of Simon before. He served as a Liberal Democrat MP from 1983 to 2015. In the coalition government, he was Minister of State for Justice and Civil Liberties between 2013 and 2015. I met Simon. He's quite a new friend of mine, and I was completely blown away when we met about his knowledge of the political asylum system in particular. So we thought it would be really good to have him here tonight and to share some of his experience from the political world, helping support asylum seekers in lots of different ways. So Simon, you were an MP for a long time. I think. Yeah, is it over 30 years in total that you're an MP for?
You're making me sound very old, Emily. Firstly, thank you very much for the invitation to join you, and thank you for the wonderful, really encouraging work that you've already started to do, and having met you and Sue and the team, and the inspiration. And it's great to see people from all over the place in this meeting, including from places where I know great work is being done. I've got family in Wakefield, and I know great work is being done for the refugees and asylum seekers there. I've got family elsewhere in London. I'm in South London, in churches here. So wherever you are, thank you for joining. And yes, I was an MP for a long time.
That wasn't the end of my question. I'm sorry, that wasn't the end of the question. But so during that time, what needs and experiences did you see of refugees and asylum seekers, and how did you help them? Well,
if I just paint the picture for everybody in the meeting, the area for which I had the privilege of being the MP was in central London. Its northern edge was the Thames, and it ran from Oxo Tower, Blackfriars Bridge, to Deptford, nearly to Greenwich in terms of the northern side, and then it came down to Camberwell and Peckham. So it was places like the Elephant and Castle and Waterloo and Bermondsey and Rotherhithe, bits of Peckham, bits of Camberwell, bits of Kennington and so on. So that's the part of London we're talking about, which is a very mixed race, multicultural community, which have seen waves of immigration over the years, Irish first, then Bangladeshi, then mainly West African, then Horn of Africa, and then most recently from Spanish and Portuguese speaking communities. And one of the key bits of work that came my way in a growing way in all of that time were people who had come from other parts of the world. Some had come legally, some had come illegally, some had come as asylum seekers or refugees, and they became a growing part of the daily work of the community that our team sought to respond to. And in the end, I don't know what the figures were, but we certainly had tens of thousands of people, quotes, on our books at any one time. I had a group within my team, both of people who I paid from public money, but also who worked voluntarily with me, who looked after them and their needs. And the team became very expert. And one of the lovely tributes is that one of the lovely Christian members of the team went on, having worked with me for several years once he left uni, to go on to qualify as a lawyer working in immigration and asylum law, which he's now doing. So that's a sign of the commitment of the team as we dealt with people, some of whom had very good English, some of whom had poor English, some of whom had no English at all, and some of whom had nothing at all, literally nothing at all.
Fantastic, and really good to have people like yourself connected and involved in that process. Could you just help us to understand a little bit more about the asylum system in the UK and how it works, and what role in particular MPs have within that?
I'm very happy to do that. I'll do it fairly simply, if that's okay for now.
Yes.
We can obviously answer questions later or follow up. But very simply, once people come to this country, then the authorities, by which I mean the government, the people who decide on people's status, which is effectively the Home Office, recognise normally only two types of people as able to represent people's right to stay or put the case to the Home Office in a way that they'll recognise. The first are members of Parliament, and only the member of Parliament for the area where that person is. And they're very strict about that, increasingly strict about that. And they say, if you want to take up a case of somebody, so I was in South London, in Bermondsey, if I wanted to take up a case of somebody in Bristol, they would say, absolutely no, it has to come from the MP for the area they live in, Bristol. So that's the first point. The other person or group of people, organisation that the Home Office will recognise is the solicitor or the lawyer for that individual. So they will sometimes recognise voluntary sector organisations, but they by their own rules, they don't have to. And their own rules, because if you think about it from their point of view, just imagine the civil servants dealing with these cases. There are hundreds of thousands of cases, and they have to, and I'm sympathetic with this, but they have to manage it, because what they couldn't realistically cope with is 17 different members of parliament all seeking to engage in correspondence and emails and phone calls about person A, about Ali or Mensa or whoever it might be. They couldn't do that. So they have to manage it. And that also then builds up a relationship. So just coming back quickly to the MP link, if it's to do with people's status, their right to stay in this country, whether they can stay indefinitely or for a fixed period, and you would always get a fixed period first, whether you're recognised as being an asylum seeker or a refugee, whether you are allowed to be dealt with here, or whether under the rules you're meant to be sent back to another country to be dealt with, because it was the country where you first went to. That is all better dealt with if there is an MP or their team. They'll deal with representatives of the MP now. They didn't used to, but they do now. And that will establish a link with the caseworker at the Home Office, who gets to know you well, and you get to know them well, because you may need to contact the Home Office out of hours regularly. I had to intervene at night and at weekends, and if people were about to be put on planes to be taken away, and you had to try, if you thought it was a good case, to stop that happening, and persuade the Home Office that they needed to look at the case. And it was no good asking for the impossible. And saying, this person must have a right. The first step would be to say, can you just pause what you're doing? Can we just hold everything and check what the position is? The second are the solicitors or the lawyers. I'm a lawyer myself, so this is not an anti-lawyer point I'm going to make, but not all solicitors are good at the job. And not all solicitors, I mean, there used to be lots of really rubbish people who held themselves out as immigration advisors, and they were really poor and poorly qualified. And there is a much more efficient regulatory system. But there are some brilliant ones who will go the extra mile and another mile and another mile. And then there are some who, to be honest, are more interested in getting the money in, and they ask for ridiculously large amounts of money to do ridiculously small amounts of work. So one of the absolutely fundamental things to everybody here is, please, firstly, work out which constituency, political parliamentary constituency you live in, and then establish which are the solicitors who are well regarded, and contacts can establish that, and there are ways in which we can help. Very last point, there is a flaw in this system, and the flaw in the system is that some members of parliament don't take up asylum and immigration cases. Some members of parliament say, I'm elected by the people who have votes. These people have no votes. I do not regard myself as having any obligation to do anything for it. It's an extraordinary view to take. And just so people don't jump to a conclusion, in my experience, it didn't all come from one political party. There were people from more than one major political party, MPs, who said, I'm not dealing with anybody unless they have a vote. And that meant that if people were asylum seekers and refugees who might not even have a home, let alone not have a vote, who might not, even if they were here permanently, be entitled to have a vote, because unless you're British or Commonwealth or Irish, you're not entitled to have a vote. So you then have a further problem. And that's really challenging, because if the MP won't help, then you are left really with the lawyers and only the lawyers. And the Home Office won't recognise that somebody else can take over in the constituency where the MP fails. So the only way to deal with that is to expose and challenge the MP and try and persuade them, pray for them, work with them, try and persuade them that that is not an acceptable position to take but I'm afraid there are more than a few who still take a very unhelpful position. So I hope that's a very clear, simple thing. MP is crucial, knowing which constituency you're in, and very good, well tried and tested, competent lawyers who are not in it to get money out of their clients is the second thing.
Definitely, that's really helpful, Simon. And as you were speaking, there was different people flashing across the top of my screen who are in the call tonight, and who I know are real advocates around the country, really advocating for the people that you're talking about who whose cases are really desperate. So I'm sure that some of the things that you've said will be really practical help and really applicable to them. So yeah, thank you for that. So I'm going to merge the next point slightly. So most people in the call tonight are Christians. We're Welcome Churches. We obviously think it's really important for Christians to be involved in this work. So why do you think that as a Christian yourself? And what practical help do you think churches should be giving to asylum seekers who are going through their cases?
Thanks, Emily. I mean, the biblical basis, other theologians in the meeting, and I'm not, but the biblical basis is clear that we are called on to help the stranger, and the stranger who is a stranger from another country is a much more in a much more difficult position than the stranger from this country. And strangers into our church community are, quotes, often difficult enough. Everybody comes with their challenges. It may be mental health, it may be homelessness. I mean, all of that is difficult. People we've never seen, people we don't know their background, all that sort of stuff. But if they're coming from somewhere else, their English may not be good. Then that's a double challenge. And my suggestion is, and each church might work out, is that there ought to be somebody either in the church leadership, ideally, who it would be agreed would take the lead as being the person responsible for the welcoming of refugees and asylum seekers in the church. So there's somebody, and that can change. It doesn't have to be a burden you take on for life, but you take on for a year at a time, somebody who's willing to do it. Supported, of course, by others, prayerfully as well as practically. First point. Second point, that the church needs to make it clear on its advertising, on its notice board, on its website, on its other things, that we welcome people of whatever faith and belief or none, wherever they come from, and we do it unconditionally. So they're welcome to come, and if they want to come just to talk confidentially to us about their status, then we would absolutely be up for that. So that's the second point. So to advertise that we are a welcome church, an open church, that we're just what the title of the organization says. And then thirdly, to provide the time and the space for that to happen in an easy way. Sometimes it's quite difficult even to get through to the church, actually. Sometimes getting hold of somebody on the phone, or getting hold of somebody by email, or getting an answer, or finding a time to it is tricky. And if you think about it, we're often talking about people who may not have laptops, may not have access to the internet, may not have a settled place from which to communicate, may not have a time when they have every time in the world they can make it between 2 and 3 on a Wednesday or something. So just check on your systems and see how accessible you are. And then lastly, find a place and a space that is welcoming and comfortable, in which people can come and on a one-to-one basis, or with somebody else, not in a way that risks the safeguarding. So you can have other people around, for safety. But I remember when our mum was a Samaritan, and eventually set up a new branch of the Samaritans, obviously that people dealt with them over the phone, but they often came in and met people on a one-to-one basis. And you have to have that space and very basic things. I saw the welcome pack being delivered, and the person to whom it was delivered offering a cup of whatever it was, tea or coffee, probably tea. People are terribly hospitable. It's just very simple: tea and biscuits, soft drink, water, just something that makes people relax. But you may then need some additional support to take that conversation on, particularly linguistic support. And if somebody comes in with very poor English, for example, then there needs to be somebody who you can go to who can help you with the translation from Arabic or Yoruba or Portuguese or whatever it might be. So those are my four tips. Have somebody who leads in the church. Secondly, have very clear communication, which says we're a welcoming church open to all. And it could say explicitly, including refugees and asylum seekers, we believe everybody should be welcome. Thirdly, have easily accessible times and spaces where people can actually make contact. And fourthly, have the backup to that person or those people, that team, that can make sure that they don't feel that they're struggling and isolated. And if there's a competent lawyer in the church community, or somebody you can recruit to do that, then they would be a very good support person or people to be able to support the team.
That's great, really helpful and really practical. And I think one of the things you said, which I really liked, is about making it accessible and going out of your way. Just to give someone a cup of tea can make the world of difference, to treat people with dignity and respect, and just as humans, really, rather than as projects at the side of our church, but treating people as a real person with a real life and real families and all of the things that come with that. So yeah.
Can I give one last teeny tip?
Go for it.
I'm reminded of it all the time, and it's useful. I always try, literally every time I go out of the door, try to have with me a card with my name and my email on it. Because people stop you sometimes, they don't just come to the church building or the church door or whatever. They stop you. Somebody stopped me literally the other day at the pedestrian crossing in the next street but one, who I'd done work for when I was the MP, and he's got himself into a muddle again. He was an asylum seeker, and he had a whole story to tell. Well, we don't always have the time at that very moment to hear the whole story, but it's really important to give people the opportunity to be able to communicate, so that you take an. It's difficult often to note down all the details. You're just about to catch the bus or whatever it might be. So just to give somebody a card which has your name and your email address, which is sufficiently protective of your own privacy, and say, look, please contact me. If you do it in this way, put on your address, your phone number, your name, or something, and then I'll come back to you, and then make sure you do that. But that's a very practical thing in your bag, your back pocket, your handbag, your shorts, or whatever it might be. Just have something you can give somebody, because you never know, the next person might stop you and
Absolutely.
might really, really need you to be in touch with them soon.
And you never know who you're going to meet who needs a welcome, do you?
Absolutely.
We've definitely seen that at Welcome Churches, that we meet all sorts of people when we're not expecting it as well. So that's great. Thank you, Simon, and thank you for all that you continue to do as well. I think one of the great things about having you on this call tonight is that we can really see that this is a movement of people who are all playing a different part in God's bigger picture, but together we're able to follow his call to welcome the stranger, and it's really encouraging to see the part that you're playing in that as well. So
this is a great initiative, so really pleased to support you.
Thank you. Thank you. So I'm joined now by Dr. Krish Kandaya. So Krish is a social entrepreneur who many of you will know from his previous role of founding and leading the charity Home for Good, encouraging the UK church to respond to the call to foster and adopt children in care. Some of you may have read some of his books, including God is Stranger, and he has a real gift. I've been working with Krish over 6 months now or so, and I've seen a real gift of his to unite the church in the UK around issues of injustice. So I've really enjoyed working with Krish this year. I've grown a lot and been challenged by him in many ways, and he doesn't realise this, but he's probably making Welcome Churches a better organisation just through our phone calls and our conversations. So it's great to have you with us tonight, Krish. We've seen lots of changes to immigration in the UK in 2021, haven't we, so far? And we've been working together on two initiatives around some of the changes that we've seen in immigration. So the first one has been, as your background suggests, about welcoming people arriving from Hong Kong. And so do you want to tell us a bit about UKHK and what we've been doing and how we've seen the UK church respond to that?
Definitely. Thank you, Emily. And it's been a privilege to work with Welcome Churches. ukhk.org wouldn't exist without Welcome Churches. So you've been absolutely fundamental in bringing this thing together. As Emily mentioned, the UK is expecting a large migration of people from Hong Kong to arrive here. 130,000 Hong Kongers are expected in this year alone. And at one level, those of us that have been interested in asylum and refugees for many years, we might be frustrated. We might think, hang on, some of us remember lobbying the government to receive 3,000 unaccompanied asylum-seeking children over 5 years. That's just 600 a year. And basically the government said, no, it wouldn't do it. So why are we opening the door to Hong Kongers? You know, is it somehow we don't like Eritrean and Sudanese and Syrian young people and adults, and we like Hong Kongers? That's a weird form of racism. But I'm thinking, hang on, Hong Kongers are made in the image of God. They need the same love and care and attention as the rest of us. Their circumstances are different, but they're still strangers that need welcoming. And therefore, if we can help this group, then that's showing the love of God to a people that are in need. And it's hard. It's hard moving house in a pandemic. I did that and it was stressful. But imagine you're trying to move house across a continent, speaking in a language that isn't your first language, trying to figure out how you do life in a completely different context. And especially when there's been a huge rise in race-based hate crime of people of Southeast Asian and Asian origin. So here is a group of people that we can help. And it's been amazing. As Emily mentioned, we went from 0 churches doing anything that we knew about with Hong Kongers to over 560, I think it is now, right across the UK. There's a map. If your church isn't on it, you can really quickly get on it. Just show your camera at my QR code and you can join the journey. And don't forget to say that you want to hear more from Welcome Churches if you haven't already. But we've seen some amazing things, just local churches. One church in the middle of rural Shropshire thought, what is the point of us getting involved in this? There won't be any Hong Kongers. And then that week, the pastor met a Hong Konger in the high street, invited him for coffee, and has been helping that Hong Kong family get to their immigration meetings. And so he says, right, I'm in. You know, who knows where these Hong Kong people will turn up. We've heard of churches in places like Manchester where 40 new families have turned up in the last 3 months, all from Hong Kong. Some are Christian already, some are on their journey to discover more about faith. And churches in Sutton where we know there are at least 300 new families that have arrived from Hong Kong in just that one borough, and probably another 400 expected to come soon, bringing with them probably in the region of 500 primary school aged children. That's a whole brand new school. Churches in Sutton doing incredible things. We're planning a friendship festival in September that's all about welcome and integration and celebrating Chinese and Hong Kong culture, but also, you know, helping us understand a bit of Cantonese, maybe helping us understand a little bit how to make dim sum, and, you know, the mayor and some of the other dignitaries welcoming Hong Kongers, and the church at the heart of that. So it's been fantastic and it's been an incredible journey. And I just want to say well done to Welcome Churches. You have a very agile and visionary team that saw this as an opportunity to bless a group of people without losing sight of your core purpose, which is to help refugees. And actually it's brought the church even more credibility with government to say, look, we'll help you with this group of people you do want to arrive here. And we'd also like to help you with another group of people you might not be so enthusiastic about.
Fantastic. And yet one of the things that we've really seen is kind of how the getting involved in welcoming Hong Kongers is blessing refugees and asylum seekers as well, isn't it? Possibly in ways that we've still yet to see, but as I've already said tonight, seeing the number of churches that are keen to welcome people from Hong Kong and refugees has been really encouraging for us. And we've seen at government as well, haven't we, that by being able to say we're helping to welcome people from Hong Kong, we've been able to have other conversations as well, haven't we? So one of the things that people might have seen in the news this year is around the government's new plan for immigration and some of the controversial things around that. Just for those of us who haven't seen it or didn't read the very lengthy document showing all the details, Could you summarise some of the key points for us in that new plan, and what's our plan for the plan, if you like?
That's a good way to put it. I've changed my background because we're onto the different project. We're going to be talking about something called the Hospitality Pledge that we're launching this Sunday, World Refugee Day. So if you've been following the story, and you know, we're not party political here, we're about speaking up for vulnerable people. You've probably seen that the new plan for immigration has some pretty draconian changes afoot, including making it very difficult or even impossible for spontaneous arrivals, for asylum seekers to seek asylum in the UK. We seem to be borrowing a lot of our ideology, I guess, from the Australian model, where they don't really want to see people claim asylum here. And that seems to be an outworking of some of the manifesto promises of getting Brexit done and protecting our borders. So it seems to be quite a core thing that the government's committed to. They also have a very large majority, and it doesn't look like they're going to kind of U-turn on this one without, you know, someone told me even if we had 500,000 people on the streets outside Westminster, they wouldn't change their mind. This is so important to what they want to do. So my feeling is, and it was interesting, Ali earlier mentioned Joseph, and Joseph was a refugee, wasn't he? But he ends up being given incredible access to government. And he decides to work with the government, and he blesses Israel, but he also blesses the nation of Egypt. They all would have starved to death without Joseph's advocacy. So I feel sometimes we're called to be a little bit like John the Baptist and call government out and be noisy. And sometimes we're called to kind of work inside the tent and find some common ground. And that's where we've been given some opportunity recently. There are a whole bunch of things I think we could agree with. So even though I want to see more asylum seekers come here, more families arrive in the UK, be resettled here, more children reunited with their families, one of the things that the government's interested in is making the assessment process fairer and faster. And I think actually that's a good thing. I would love it if people didn't have to spend years bouncing around the asylum system. We met someone together, didn't we, Emily, that had been in the system for 12 years, and it wrecked their mental health, just not knowing where they belonged. So we agree that it should be fairer and faster, but we think the way to make that happen was to give more support at the beginning of someone's journey, so that when they present themselves for their asylum assessment, they're in a good state of mind, they've got all their papers together. It turns out that most people who fail to have they get their asylum claim refused, 40% of them get it the second time round. They get accepted the second time round. For me, that says that they weren't helped or supported at the beginning. So do you see what we're trying to find? Some common ground that says, look, there's a way to do this that's more humane, that meets some of your targets, but actually will be able to bless and help people. So we've been given a lot of access to try and figure those things through. And I might as well just finish this off by telling you the kind of big picture. So hopefully on Sunday we'll have stats out that say, here's a sneak peek, 6 in 10 Britons actually want the asylum process to be more compassionate. And so we're going to launch our Hospitality Pledge, which is a new initiative, this weekend off the back of that survey. And we're going to call people to use their voice to speak up for the vulnerable, just like Joseph did, just like we were told in Proverbs 31, verse 8, to speak up for those that have no voice. But also ask Christians to use their houses too. This whole idea of hospitality. Last year, NACOM, and I think I saw Paul on this, is the No Accommodation Network. They, in 2019 to 2020, they were able to look after 1,200 people who would have otherwise been street homeless because of their asylum refusal. Because once you claim asylum, you can't work and you can't claim any public funds. But they had to turn away 1,800 people because they didn't have enough bed space in homes. Now, 1,800 bed spaces is quite a lot until you factor in the church. We've got maybe 100 churches represented here. There are way over 1,800 churches in Britain. So all it would take would be one new host per church, and we could meet that entire need. That would make a huge difference to these asylum seekers who would otherwise be homeless. but it would also send a huge signal to the government. Look, the church is not just about wagging the finger and telling you to do things. We want to put our houses where our mouths are and offer genuine hospitality. So that's something we're going to be launching from the weekend onwards, and it's great to have Welcome Churches as a key partner in that initiative.
Definitely, and yeah, that's great, Krish. And as you say, really, really good to be able to talk about hospitality again in the church. We were talking the other day, weren't we, about how sometimes we hear the word hospitality and we think hotels and food and things like that, but actually it's such a key part of the church's mandate to offer hospitality to those who need it. And yeah, so we're excited to go on that journey with you as well. Okay, so I'm going to hand over now to Joanna, who is going to share with us our Refugee Sunday film. Joanna is a really gifted storyteller. She wouldn't probably say that herself, but she's really great at being able to meet people and tell their stories in film form. So we're really pleased to be able to share this Refugee Sunday film with you, which I know many of you are using in your church services this weekend as well. So over to Joanna for more information.
Okay, thank you, Emily. So yes, as you've heard, I'll be sharing a short film that we've been working on for Refugee Sunday. So you met Grace Church earlier on in the Welcome Boxes video. So while we were at Grace Church, we met an asylum seeker called Ashgar, and he shared his story with us, and it was so encouraging. So it's something that we thought we'd share with you guys for Refugee Sunday, being as this year's Refugee Sunday is actually on Father's Day, so 20th of June. So we just wanted to honor refugee fathers and sort of just remember their journey and their story, and just remind them that they're loved and they're celebrated as well. So I will share that with you right now.
Being a father is one of the most rewarding roles you could have. The opportunity to bring a child into the world and to raise it. Fathers are seen as protectors, providers. They can influence and impact our values. They provide security both emotionally and physically. Today, as we celebrate the world's fathers, we would like to remember the refugee fathers who have shown incredible courage and resilience as they seek a safer life for their children. Ashgar is one such father. He's here to share part of his story and journey as a refugee father.
سلام، من اشقر هستم از کشور ایران. من به علت تغییر دین در کشورم مجبور شدم از کشورم فرار کنم. دو تا پسر دارم، خانومم و خودم. که دو تا پسرم، یکی 7 سالشه، یکی هم 17 سالشه. من یه حسیه که واقعا باید پدر باشی تا متوجه بشی واقعا پدر بودن چی هستش. همه مسئولیت ها گردن باباست. یعنی واقعا سخته که یه پدر باشی و همه مسئولیت هایی که میفته گردنت واقعا سخته. توصیف کردنش برای من سخته. من اون روزی که پدر شدم یه حس غرور بهم دست داد. وقتی که تو خیابون میرم و قدم میزنم میبینم که بچه ها با پدرشون مادرشون تو خیابون دارن میرن میان. خب من 1 سال خورده ای از خانواده‌ام دورم. مثلا با پسر کوچیکم که خیلی اونس من گرفته بود، مدرسه میبردمش میآوردمش. وقتی اینا رو میبینم آدم یه حسی خب ناراحت میشه. چند روز پیش تولد پسر کوچیکم بود. قبلا میگفت کادوی تولدم و من تبلت میخوام. منتها شب تولدش گفتش که من کادو نمیخوام، من بابامو میخوام. این مسائل ما راهی که انتخاب کردیم خدا را شکر تو این راه آرامش میگیریم فقط به خاطر عیسی مسیح و خداوند. حدوداً 8 ماه ما خودی الان حضور ذهن ندارم. منو معرفی کردن اینجا، ما رو تقسیم کردن از هتل اینجا اومدیم با آقای روب و جناب آقای تازل، بعد آقای دیو معرفی کردن. سهام مترجم بنده بودن توی این مدت. خیلی زحمت هم کشیدن به عنوان یک فارسی زبان که واقعا سخت بود برای من. اینجا اومده بودم هیچ کس نمیشناختم، شهر غریب، تنها. خوشحالم، خیلی خوشحالم بابت اینکه خواهر برادرای زیادی پیدا کردم و اینا همینجوری دارن اضافه میشن. مسیح به همه برادران و خواهرانم تو این کلیسای کرز برکت بده و بهشون آرامش بده.
As we celebrate Father's Day in the UK, please pray for fathers like Asghar who are separated from their families and for young children who long to be reunited with their father. Let's give thanks that we are all united by our one Heavenly Father. As He welcomed us into His family, we can welcome others who are looking for a family to belong to today. Romans 8, verses 15 to 16. The Spirit you received does not make you slaves, so that you live in fear again. Rather, the Spirit you received brought about your adoption to sonship, and by Him we cry, Abba, Father. The Spirit Himself testifies with our spirit that we're God's children.
Thank you. I don't know about you, just very moving watching that. I know a lot of us on the call have heard a lot of stories over the years, but yeah, just really value his honesty and faith and thankfulness for the welcome that he got. I feel we almost need a pause before we go on to the next bit of this evening. If you would like to show that video at your church, you can go to our website and you'll find a place there where you can request to have it. So now we are going to hear from Patrick Regan for a few inspiring minutes with him, and he will then chair our panel so that we can start to answer some of the questions that you've been putting in the chat. So many of you, I'm sure, already know Patrick. Patrick is the CEO and co-founder of Kintsugi Hope, a charity set up to equip the church to better support people with mental health challenges. And prior to that, Patrick led the urban youth work charity XLP, which he ran for 22 years. So this year, he also became patron of Welcome Churches, which we're thrilled about, and we have really enjoyed getting to know him, and we've really been thankful for his support as well. So welcome, Patrick, and thank you for joining us.
No problem. Welcome, everyone. It's so lovely to see your little boxes. I always think it's weird talking on Zoom because people look like they are dying very slowly. But if you could give me a smile, if you look, there you go. That's nice, isn't it? And it's such an honour and a privilege to be here with you this evening. And I don't know why I always get this. I always get like, do a really 5-minute inspirational talk, so there's no pressure whatsoever. But I think you're all activists, and that's why you're here tonight. And so thank you so much. You are doing an amazing job, and I'm so passionate about the work of Welcome Churches and what Chris is doing. It's amazing, isn't it? Because justice is actually what love looks like in public. That's a really famous quote, isn't it? And we all know there's an absolute biblical mandate to care for the stranger. You guys know that. But what I find really, really inspiring is that God's ultimate intentions for human history are his intentions for us now. When I was a kid, I used to think about heaven quite a lot. And I don't know what you think heaven is going to be like. I don't know if you've ever been in one of those Christian meetings where the worship's gone on for about 2 hours. And particularly at the end, when you want to get home, and the worship leader turns to the congregation and goes, heaven will be like this. Is there a little part of you that goes, oh, please, God, no, I can't sing anymore. I love singing, but I just can't sing anymore. Or the worship leader will go, God gave me this song. And when you hear the song, you know why God wanted to get rid of it. Do you know what I mean? And it is like heaven was going to be like this. We're all going to be there. We're going to be singing all day long. There's going to be quiche because it's a Christian event, and really weak Ribena. And that was like my view of heaven. And after a while, I thought, actually, this sounds really dull. I'm not sure this sounds something I want to give my life for. And when I was at Bible college, I studied the book of Isaiah. And Isaiah talks about this new heaven and a new earth that actually this earth isn't going to be wasted. What we do in the here and now isn't to be wasted. And God isn't just going to chuck away the world and go, well, that was awful. That was a bit of a mistake. And now we're going to start again. That he was going to create a new heaven and a new earth. And there was this theologian who I particularly love called Walter Brigham, who talks about the ministry of imagination. And I remember when I was at Bible college thinking, wouldn't it be amazing that if I could place myself in the book of Isaiah? And, you know, Isaiah talks about this wasteland and the mountain of God growing in there, and the restoration of all things. And I started to use my imagination, I guess, and I started to imagine some of the people that I've met in my journeys around the world. I imagine my little mate Kofi in Ghana. Kofi basically throws up after every meal that he has because his mum is an alcoholic and he's malnourished. And I gave his mum food. I thought I was doing a really good job, and I didn't quite understand the situation. And yet through churches and love, that he's doing so well at the moment. I'm so proud of him, and he's there, and he's grown, and he's tall, and he's restored. And then next to him are the people I met in Bolivia. These twins sitting on my lap with probably the saddest woman that I have ever met. And these 6-month-old twins, I turned to this lady and I said, how are you feeding them? And she said, we're so poor, we're feeding them dog food. And yet in my vision of a new heaven, new earth, they're there and they're restored and they're doing okay. And the mum's not the saddest lady I've ever seen, but it's actually looking okay. And then I've you know, in recent years, I've been to Iraq and I've met some of these refugees. The refugees are incredible. Their stories, they're so resilient. They're so amazing. They teach me so much. And I met these beautiful kids at an internationally displaced center, just 40 minutes away from Mosul. The trauma that they have been through. And yet God's going to heal that, and he will wipe away every tear from their eyes. And how about my friends in Romania, these kids in an AIDS hospital who were basically not mentally ill, but mentally delayed because they're not stimulated the way that my kids are stimulated and used to stimulated. And I sat there on the bed with them there in Romania, and I believe that God was going to restore them as well. And then there was Jamaica, a very precious place to me, where my friend rang me up one night because bullets were flying through the sky and they'd just come through her shutter. And I thought maybe she could be there next to all these people, all these refugees, all the asylum seekers, all the brokenness, all the trauma. And then we go and we run up the mountain of God. And when we get there, Jesus is there and the lion lays down with the lamb and everything is restored. And I thought, my goodness, that's a better vision of heaven than lots of worship songs and some quiche. But the punchline is this: God's ultimate intentions for human history are his intentions for us now. So until that day comes, we get on with the restoration work. We get on with the work in the here and now. The gospel is the restoration of shalom. It's where shalom is most needed. It's for the poor, the broken, the victims of injustice, the abused, the trapped, the marginalized, the imprisoned, that those who feel like they haven't got a voice. And in joining in that, actually, we're joining in God's ultimate intentions for human history. A friend of mine, I'll finish with this, once said to me recently, and I think it's a really good point. She suffers from a chronic illness, and she says, in church, we often talk about, God, please use me. And she said, in any other thing, wouldn't it? That would be a negative thing, right? To be used by someone in any other walk of life. And she said, I don't want to think of God as using me. I want to believe that God partners with me. He partners with us to bring in his kingdom, to bring in restoration, to bring in wholeness. And we get to partner with him, the living God, whether it's in government or outside government, whether it's caring for the stranger, the individual, whether it's championing the cause, we get to do that. So we're going to move on now to a time of discussion, debate, grappling with some of the issues that are so important to us. And I'm going to invite back Krish and Emily and Ali and Sue, and they're all going to appear here on your screen. And please, we have got so many questions, so we probably won't get through them all. And but we really want to try and get through as many as we can. And Sue, I want to come to you if I may, and just really ask you about that. You know, people often talking about trauma-informed care at the moment, and that actually dealing with people's trauma and what they've been through is so important. And I really know that's on your heart, isn't it?
Yeah, it is very much. Since coming back to the UK, having lived in the Middle East, just heard so many people's stories. I have one Syrian friend of mine. He said, I think every Syrian is dealing with trauma in their lives. And I think as churches, it's really good for us to grow in our knowledge in this area and to realize what we can do to help in terms of providing community, providing safe places, including people, inviting people, being around people, and perhaps the things where we do need to refer on to other people, that is important as well. But let's grow as church, and let's just understand a little bit more and not be afraid to be out there a little bit in terms of hearing stories that might make us feel uncomfortable, but growing in our ability to embrace people anyway and to continue to journey with them and not to be put off by things that we hear or trauma that might be shocking to us or way beyond what we ourselves could cope with.
Yeah, because I think that understanding always challenges your perspective, isn't it? So there is a sense of trying to understand the issues. We've got a question here, Simon, I'll come to you if I may. If you could make one change to the asylum system in the UK that you think would make the biggest difference, what would that be? Just a tiny question there. For you.
Thank you very much. Just uncomplicated. Thanks, Patrick. Good to see you. And Chris too. The answer ties into what one thing Chris said. It is that the system, that we put enough resources in the system to deal quickly, fairly and compassionately with everybody, rather than string this out. So that for me, and it does mean resources, but at the moment we have lots of people out of work. We're not short of human resources in this country and expertise. And just the PS to that is that one thing's, I dealt with the case for a long time, and you can make human rights applications that are separate from asylum applications. And some people don't want to make an asylum application because they think two things might happen. If it fails, or the Home Office are thinking about it, they might be held in detention, and they've been in detention often, they've escaped from prison or escaped from terrible places. So the thought of doing something that puts them through a system which might put them back in detention is discouraging. And some people don't want to give up the thought that they can never again go back to their own country because their mum may live there, or their grandparents may live there, or their wife or their husband or their children may be there. And if you seek asylum, they think that means that you're never going to be able to go back. So the system has to allow the appeals, Chris talked about it, huge numbers of appeals succeed after the initial decision. And he's right, I think the figures are something of the order of 4 in 10. But also, in this case, we lost, after long processes, the human rights application. And then we persuaded the guy that he ought to make an asylum application. And with really excellent lawyers, we won the asylum application. So more resources to make sure that everybody's case is dealt with fairly, compassionately, but as speedily as possible. And we're a rich enough country to do it. Yeah, despite the pandemic, we're one of the 6 richest countries in the world. Don't tell me that we don't have the resources to spare on the Syrian refugees, or the Somali refugees, or the refugees from Boko Haram in northern Nigeria. I just don't accept that. And the politics has to win that argument. I'm going to say one other thing, and then you can shut me up, Patrick, which is this. Chris is also right to say that lots of demonstrations of large numbers outside Parliament and lots of sort of email lobbying may have an influence, but it's not the most useful influence. The most useful influence is for the people on this call to engage with their local members of Parliament and their ministers face to face. Sit down when they have time to listen to you. Make sure they're not just giving you 5 minutes, and win them round to realize that this is something they should do because it's the right thing to do. And one person won over to our cause in the corridors of power is worth 100 emails or 1,000 emails or 1,000 people on the streets with a placard.
Yeah, I think that's. I think I just want to underline that actually our voices are always heard loudest out of relationship. And I know that over the years that I've worked so hard at building relationship with some of the MPs and to try and influence through what we're doing, and I think that's so important because one MP said to me some of the nastiest letters he gets are from Christians who claim to speak for God, and that's not our heart. And so there is a sense, how do we build a relationship? And I know from personal experience, having built known Simon for 25 years, he has just been incredible at seeking to care for the vulnerable in his constituency and beyond, actually, which has been so inspiring. There's another question here, which I think there's a couple of questions around this, actually.
Sorry, Patrick, I think it might be helpful to have Ali's point of view on that question as well, because he's not pinned, but
oh yeah, great,
in the panel, so it would be great to hear Ali's point of view on what he thinks might change the asylum system.
Yeah.
Good idea.
Yeah,
Brilliant.
probably one of the issues with asylum systems is here. When I was asylum seeker myself, the people who do not have enough information about this asylum system, they are very scared actually to go to Home Office and apply for asylums. And there have been cases actually people staying in this country illegally for many years, but they were afraid to go to the Home Office and apply for asylum case because of the reason that the panelists say that they might be actually returned back to their countries, and that's why the. But if there is a kind of clear information that based on these category you can apply for asylums and you are protected actually, then the people, it's much easier for them to go to Home Office and apply for the rights that they are asylum seeker and they need protection from this country.
Thanks, Ali. That was really, really insightful. Thank you for that. There's a question here. Culturally speaking, what would you advise trying to churches that are very largely white middle class but live near Somalian refugees that have settled and would love to engage and welcome and create a community that will leave a room for cultural differences, but not quite knowing how to start, I guess. Emily, what would you say to that?
Quite hard, not knowing the context exactly, but I would probably say find out, ask them what their needs are, or how you can offer a welcome to them and make it mutual. Don't go with lots of aid or lots of food or things that kind of see you as being the helper and then being the helped, but think about how you can make a mutual connection where you're both sharing your own experiences, your own lives with each other, and go on that journey together, but start that conversation and go forward.
Yeah, it's always good to start listening, isn't it? Chris, people are asking where are Hong Kongers mostly moving to in the UK? How are they finding housing in these areas? And how is this different to other asylum seekers and refugees?
Great question. So I would say there's two main types of Hong Konger that's coming to the UK. The smaller group, probably 200 to 300, are young activists who needed to flee Hong Kong because of political persecution. They would be ending up in prison. And a lot of them are sofa surfing. We are working with a lovely charity in the NACOM network to help find some accommodation for some of them. More details from me personally if you want to find out more about that. We are looking for some more hosts. But this larger group, 130,000, they are very well skilled. So we've just done a survey of nearly 800 Hong Kongers, either here or on their way here. And half of them have a degree. Of those people that have a degree, a third of them have a postgraduate qualification. So this is a highly skilled migration. Most are kind of between 30 and 50, I think. Many of them have come because of schooling. That's why you're seeing those primary age children come. They are coming to London, of course, but not just London. They're coming to Manchester, specifically to Sale. We're hearing about people coming to Birmingham and Bristol, Edinburgh, Glasgow, a few in Wales, but I don't know, maybe after Wales win tonight, there'll be more Hong Kongers that want to go to Wales. They tend to, in general, go to where there are existing large Chinese communities already, but that's not exclusive. If you want Hong Kongers to come to your area, start shouting about how great your schools are. They are looking on the map and finding out where the best schools in the country are. That's why they're in Sale, that's why they're in Sutton. Some of them have got their eye on grammar schools. So if you've got a grammar school near you, guess what? You're going to see some Hong Kongers arriving soon.
There you go. Sue, someone's asked here, and maybe Ali, you'd might want to come in on this as well, and saying that obviously language can be a barrier for a welcome, but what are the other cultural considerations when welcoming refugees? Are there things we should possibly be avoided, and how do we know what is appropriate?
Ali, do you want to start on that question?
Yeah, it's really, honestly, it's a difficult question, but one thing is obvious, as you mentioned, or the question mentioned, is about the language. Language is a barrier, but how to know about a different culture, it's really difficult, actually. Probably every culture has got their own understanding of communication. But one thing is, I think, very clear that I'm sure every refugee and asylum seeker is happy to have a British friend, is happy to have somebody knock on the door and say that you're welcome in my community. You're not alone. You're not alone here, and we are here with you, because they are alone. They left their families, they left their friends, and they come to a new country that probably they don't speak the language, they don't know the culture. But if somebody give that kind of the impression that you're not alone, we are here with you, that would be the key, I think.
Great. Sue, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I would just say, I mean, obviously having someone who can interpret or speak your language is absolutely fantastic for a refugee or asylum seeker, but it's not always possible to find that person. So I guess I want to encourage churches, don't let that hold you back, whether culture or language, is very different. Don't be nervous about approaching people. They're just people. So just go for it. Be a learner. Learn as you go along. There's bound to be some weird moments or funny things or misunderstandings, and that's okay in the context of you reaching out, offering community, offering friendship and support. So yeah, be aware of things, but don't let them stop you going forward with welcoming people and offering community.
Yeah, and some of the stuff that you guys do, Emily, is around training as well, isn't it? It's that actually where people, I think, sometimes can feel a little bit overwhelmed. Sometimes people actually don't do stuff because their fear of making a mistake. And what Sue's doing is actually encouraging us to learn, to understand, and to overcome that fear barrier. And you guys do so much training in that area. That's so helpful.
Definitely. I'd say that if you don't feel confident, then get trained, because the training is there to give you that confidence to kind of overcome some of those barriers and step out of your comfort zone in some way as well. But yeah, we're here to help you. We're here to resource you. So let us go on that journey with you.
Yeah, so do check out, I encourage you guys, check out the website. And sometimes we can listen to events like this, can't we? And can go, what next? And actually, it's really good to have a tangible thing that we can do afterwards, isn't it? And maybe getting trained, getting more equipped could be a really good outcome from tonight. There's a question here around refugees and asylum seekers struggle due to the lack of credit score, so are unable to gain loans to start up small businesses. The UK government states an intention to support unemployed people getting a loan, but refugees and asylum seekers are excluded due to the lack of credit. What advice or suggestions can you offer, Sir Simon Hughes?
Another easy question. This should have gone to Chris, this question, but anyway, because he's a social entrepreneur. But,
I'll go to Chris afterwards, don't worry.
All right, thank you. Can I not avoid the question, but can I just add a quick follow-up on the last conversation? If you're in a church in a predominantly white area with very few people who are asylum seekers and you want to link, then often it's possible to twin with the church in the inner city or whatever. We did that politically. We twinned. We were in the middle of the inner city. We twinned with a district in Surrey, in leafy, fairly affluent Surrey, and supported each other. Churches can do that within the Anglican context. You can do it through the diocese, every diocese will have rural and urban place. So that's one thought. And the other two groups of people who are great allies, to pick up Sue's point, normally the local FE college will have lots of experience of students who come with English as a foreign language and are coming to seek to learn. And the principal of the FE college will be people who have special expertise, and also secondary schools, but particularly FE colleges. So make contact with your local FE college. That will normally tap you into a great resource of people with language abilities. The answer to credit point is a really tricky one, actually, Patrick. Seriously, it's a very tricky one. My suggestion is that this is where the church can be really practical and really helpful. There are credit unions, which are obviously our best friends in this space. But the best way is for the church to begin to set up some sort of, if you're up for it, and yes, it's not easy, but set up effectively a sort of a credit union system for the people in your reach who are asylum seekers and refugees, so that they can start to be able to build up a credit score. And I discovered from a request from somebody recently that those of us who have credit cards can ask for somebody else to be joined on our credit card if we trust them. Now, it's not only family, they don't insist, some banks are different, we need to check this out, but obviously you have to vouch for them, as it were, but it's a way of them getting a credit score, because if you don't have any credit score yourself, but somebody joins your credit card and I mean, they don't have to have access to all your credit material at all. So it is simply that you allow them, for example, to go out and use the credit score to go to your credit card, to go to, it's the second version of the card. So they have a card, it's on the same account, and they can go to the supermarket and they can do the shopping. And when they spend, provided you pay it off at the end of every month to honor obligations, that helps them with their credit reference, because it builds up a financial transaction that shows that they're creditworthy. This probably, Sue and Emily, needs a bit more sort of advice and assistance, but there are ways in which people can be, as it were, eased in to having a credit reference, but otherwise it is a very tricky thing to do. And credit unions may be the first port of call, Patrick, to go and talk to see if they could be helpful.
Yes, I
other people may have equally good ideas.
Yeah, just to say that I know there are other organisations that are designed, as you say, Simon, like credit unions, that are designed to deal with the issues that there are around credit. We can't solve everybody's problems who are seeking refuge in our communities, and we can go on that journey with them, and some of that will be trying to help them find the help they need from elsewhere. So don't feel that you need to take on every part of everybody's lives, but help them to navigate your community and the different places that they can get help to find the answers that they need as well.
Chris, did you want to add what Simon said there? He's done an okay job.
He's done an amazing job. I've learned something. I didn't know you could share your credit card history. That's fantastic. Brilliant.
Yeah, I'll be texting my number over. Chris, people are asking, would you be able to share a little bit from your recent visit to Cornwall and the G7 summit? And what do you feel the responses from the leaders at the moment around refugees and asylum seekers and the persecuted? Is it, with COVID and all those challenges are going on, are we seeing this drop off the radar, or are people still engaging with this issue?
That's a great question. I was on a long train for most of the weekend going to Cornwall and back to attend the G7 prayer breakfast. And it was an incredible meeting. We had people there from the Uyghur community in China talking about their experiences, and it's off the chart terrible. It's even worse than you've heard in the media. I think there's a real opportunity for the church to do something significant in that space, and please, watch this space. It's coming soon. I think I posted something in the chat for you to come to the launch of the Hospitality Pledge. It's got some things to do with that element of things. I don't think the world leaders were particularly hot on the issue of refugees and asylum. This G7, I think they focused more on climate change and didn't really get to where they needed to. Vaccine was obviously the other big thing. 1 billion vaccines pledged is great. I think we need 11 billion, and the G7 are the richest countries. So, you know, where are the other 10 billion going to come from? So I think we just need to keep it on their radar, recognizing that, you know, they've got a lot of things to juggle. But for me, the prayer breakfast was about networking and meeting people who are just doing some fantastic things around the scene, lining things up for the next phase, I think.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you for that, Krish. And Emily, I really wanted to ask, how do you feel as Christians that actually we can sort of, I don't know, change the narrative, I guess, around, you know, this language of illegal immigrants? How can we use our leverage in community, in congregations, and in government? How can we influence those things? Because often people's language is so discouraging and really hurtful and painful.
Yeah, well, it starts with knowing someone by name, because when you know someone by name, you see them differently. You see them as a person, you see them as your friend, you see them as your brother or your sister, and that makes all the difference in how you perceive them. And so that when you're then in those conversations where you say, well, I don't know who we should be letting in, or whatever they may be, you can say, well, actually, my friend who I met, that wasn't their experience, and actually they've left their family behind and they really hate that. So it's not, they've not come because they want the good life of the UK and they want all of our benefits, but they had no other option, and they've had to make huge sacrifices because of that. And when you know that person by name and you can make that story very tangible, it makes a world of difference, because people are no longer statistics, and no longer just people that we see on the news, but yeah, they're people we care about, and we're people we want to treat with dignity and respect.
Yeah, and I really feel like the relationship is the key to everything, isn't it? And I always say to people that there are no them and us. There's just us. I remember someone once said to me, "What is poverty?" And there's all these definitions of poverty that go around, and I always thought that for me, poverty was almost like the lack of friends, because I wouldn't let my friend live in a cardboard box. Just would never happen. I wouldn't let my friend prostitute herself, because that's the only way she can bring her money for her kids. And I think that relationship build is so crucial.
It also, the other thought is just that it also breaks down our own perceptions. Absolutely. So I remember this one lady that we welcomed in my church, who and one day she texted me asking for a lift to church, and she texted me at like 20 to 7, and the service started at 6:30, and I was like, how rude. Does she not realize that in the UK we're on time, and I've not really got time to drive across the city and pick her up? She needs to understand British culture. She needs to learn what we do here. And then when I spoke to her later in the evening, she said, oh, today is my daughter's birthday today, and I've not seen her for 6 years. And you know, God obviously really challenged me in that moment, and it gave me a really good talking to, because I had completely misread the situation, and our own perceptions are broken down as we meet people personally, and yeah, we're all taken on that journey as well.
Absolutely. People don't want to be fixed, they want to be loved and listened to. Ali, this last question is for you. If people could be praying into the area of what refugees are going through at the moment and asylum seekers, how would you encourage people to pray at the moment?
Probably there are different needs. So for prayer, I think one of the needs is those that were still asylum seekers, for their cases be reviewed by Home Office. Some of them has been actually waiting for a long time, and due to COVID pandemic, the cases are just staying there. And the health conditions and the living conditions, some of the asylum seekers are actually in a very poor conditions they are staying. And for the refugees, those who got their status actually, and they starting a new life, but they will find out that a lot of challenges are ahead of them. They just know, okay, they're very happy that they are refugee, but they need to look out for the job, they need to look out for the housing. And I just got, I mean, one of our Afghan friends got refugee status, and now he is homeless because they give the notice 28 days, and when you go to the city council, they will not act in advance. The moment that you're homeless, then you will be actually considered as a homeless. So all those, I think, issues that we can pray for both refugee and asylum seekers, really appreciate.
That's brilliant. Well, thank you so much. I'm going to hand back to Sue, but Simon, thank you so much. Emily, Krish, Ali, thank you so much for your wisdom. Guys, there's a lot of comments in the chat. I'd really encourage you. I know Simon's written some stuff in there as well. As like all these things, you've never got time to get to all the questions, but please keep engaging with Welcome Churches. Go onto the website and get involved, mate. God bless you. Back to Sue.
Thank you. Just a quick minute from me before we end. Just been a fantastic evening. So much to think about, so many different things for each one of us. So I just want to end with a thought about Welcome Churches. We are, as you heard throughout the evening, we are growing very rapidly, and we're all involved with resourcing churches and equipping them. And we would just really love you to join us in this. Please do pray for us. Please sign up to our newsletter. And please, as you go away from today, you know, prayerfully consider the steps that your church might take as a result of something that you've heard this evening. So this year, in order to keep on growing, we would love to increase the number of people and churches who donate regularly to us. Even just a small amount every month makes a difference. So please consider supporting Welcome Churches in our vision that we can see every refugee welcomed by a local church. You can donate via our website, and we will share the link in a moment as we close. So if you've been inspired, we would love you to join in the work of Welcome Churches in this way. And thank you for that. And lastly, just very many thanks to Krish and to Simon and Patrick for their time, their wisdom, for your inspiration tonight. We'd all love to give you a clap of thanks, but we'll have to do it virtually. Thank you for joining us. And thank you everyone for coming.